So I've posted a few stories of my encounters with the supernatural, and this one happened to me this year while I was deployed in Africa. I've been in the military for over 7 years and I've been to many places, but Africa was by far the darkest place I've visited. We were in the mountains conducting platoon base attacks against OP4, which are basically other soldiers in different uniforms being bad guys. My platoon was on a night shift providing our camp security. In the mountains where we were, there was not a lot of coverage, so with NVGs, night vision goggles, I was able to see quite far. I was at my post just passing the time, smoking a cigarette trying to stay awake because of the missions we ran during the day. I was sitting down with my weapon and wearing all my gear, then I heard footsteps. My first thought was, oh shit, here we go. Our weapons didn't have real ammunition, they were just blanks because this was training. So I dropped my NVGs and start scanning the ridge line for the enemy, but no one was out there, so I chalk it up to imagination because I was tired. Then I turn off my NVGs and relax. Then I hear the footsteps again, but this time it sounds like the person is in a full sprint. I jump up, turn on my NVGs, and again no one was there. At this point I start getting paranoid. So I keep my NVGs in ready position, but turned off. The batteries die really fast, so I didn't want to waste them. Now I'm just staring out into the darkness. There's very little I can see with the naked eye and with a little bit of light from the moon. Then I see the enemy crawling over the side of the mountain in front of me, so I'm ready this time. I draw my weapon and turn on my NVGs, but then I don't see the person I was just looking at through my NVGs. I turn them off and look again, and there he was just standing there off the side of the cliff. However, this time there are more people with him. Fuck it, I thought, and started firing into the darkness, thinking if these were our guys I would have killed them, and if not, this will give whoever they are a scare. We were in the middle of nowhere, and we would encounter locals and goat herders every now and again that would wander into our training site, but they never came at night, so this was odd for us. But these guys were just standing there, no more than 50 feet away from me. My team leader runs up behind me and asked why the hell am I shooting. I point out the group of people on the ridge line and tell him that they crawled over the mountain, so I thought they were the OP4. Then he tells me, the OP4 aren't attacking tonight, then pulls out a flashlight and shines it on the people on the ridge line, but there was no one there. I just thought to myself I scared them away, until my team leader walked away. I sat back down and I felt someone grab the back of my uniform and started dragging me towards the cliff. I started screaming and fighting back, but for the life of me I couldn't find the hand that was pulling me. The whole camp woke up and started pulling out flashlights to see what was happening. When they spotted me and pointed their flashlights at me, I was only 5 feet away from the cliff. I told my team leader what happened, and for the rest of the night no one slept. We cracked open all our chem lights and put them all around the camp. When the sun came up, we reported back to base and gave a debriefing to our commander on why we cut training short. The look on my commander's face told me he wasn't surprised at all, then told us to go shower and get something to eat. We never went back out to that range, and he never sent anyone out there again. A few months later we were driving out there for daytime training, and we ran into some locals. Some of them spoke English, so we asked them if anything weird happens at night. They said no one goes out at night because of the shadow men. We asked them to tell us a little more, and he said, goat herders and kids walk and play in the mountains. Sometimes the mountains will give way and the people fall to their death, so at night they look for people to join them. Then he told us something that sent chills down my spine. If the spirits like you, they will want to play with you, so they will drag you off a cliff so you can stay with them forever. Because of that, I'd always carry a headlamp on me at all times. I moved into this house about 3 years ago with my parents and brother. I got lucky and got the guest room downstairs while everyone else is upstairs. My parents in the master bedroom and my next room to the bathroom. The first night in the house wasn't really anything but normal. However, the second night is where things started to get a little weird. I have a lock on both my bathroom door, included in my room, and my regular door. I locked both when I decided to take a shower that day. Nothing out of the ordinary happened at this time. I started drying off and walked into the bathroom again, and there was a baby handprint on my mirror. I got a little freaked out, no doubt, but didn't think too much of it. When I went to sleep that night though, I heard everything being rearranged in my bathroom. My shampoo and face wash was moved to the other side of the shower, and I couldn't grasp how it got there. I should mention that most of these paranormal, demonic things I'm going to mention later in the story don't happen to me directly, but to the rest of my family. I should also mention that my family has had experiences with demons before, and they never really leave my family alone. Anyways, back to the story. So I go on this annual trip to Arizona every year to visit my grandparents, and while I was gone my brother had a couple of friends over, and they went downstairs to make food late one night. This particular night they saw a shadow person coming out of my room. Not surprisingly, they booked it out of the house. When I came back from my trip, I walked in my room and it smelt kind of weird, so I asked what my dad thought of it, and what he said kind of scared me. He informed me that he had to do a cleansing in my room because there was evil in there. Now I should mention my dad is a pastor's kid. My grandpa has been a pastor for over 50 years, so when he has to do a cleansing, that means something is really wrong. Other weird things have been happening, adding to this as well. I would walk out in the kitchen and the lights would be flickering. My brother can't stop talking about a man he sees who is physically harming him at this point. It's not just him who's seen it. It's all of his friends. People are scared to spend the night at my house because of what they've seen or the worries that they've heard. My dad tries to cast the demonic entities out, but they came back even stronger and angrier, and I'm honestly a little worried. It all started in May of 2015. My grandma moved into a new house after living in a very old wooden one her great-grandfather had built more than 10 years, which I was pretty sad about since I liked it there a lot. If you're wondering what happened to the house, she gave it to her brother, and it's still standing to this day. I brought my bike there because I really liked going to places with it at the time, and I decided to ride around town with it. After doing that for a while, it didn't take long because it was a pretty small town, I discovered a 2-story brick building with pretty big windows near the town shop. So I went back home and asked my mum, who was there at the time, what the building was. She told me it was an abandoned school. It amazed me, and since that day I really wanted to explore it, which is what I did a year later. Around 5 p.m. on a summer afternoon, when the sun was shining bright, I rode my bike to the school and tried opening the door, and surprise, surprise, it was locked. However, when I rode around the back of the school, I found old rusted metal stairs which led to a door with its bottom half cut open. I was kind of interested to see what was there, but I didn't check it out as I was scared. A year passes and I made a group of friends, 3 guys including me and 2 girls. We decided to play hide and seek for the hell of it, and that's when I remembered the stairs to the door. I quickly rushed there, climbed up the stairs, and after quite a bit of hesitation entered through the bottom half of the door. It was insanely dark in there, and it smelled like hell. I cannot describe to you how terrible the smell was. After about 10 minutes of waiting with no one finding me, I turned on the flashlight on my phone and looked around for a bit, until I eventually saw what looked like a rotting corpse. I didn't realise that at first, but it still terrified the living hell out of me, and I ran out of there as quickly as I possibly could, nearly falling down the stairs in the process. I figured that at that point the game must have been over and went behind the shop, the spot we decided to meet up after the game, but to my surprise there was no one there. That's weird, I thought to myself. Well, better hide somewhere else then. I hid by the side of the shop. I decided to check the time, and that's when I realised that when I was running for my life, my phone fell out of my pocket. Needless to say, I was terrified. I ran back there praying that it hadn't fallen out inside the building, and to my absolute relief it hadn't. The screen was cracked a bit, but I didn't really care at that point. Then all my happiness and relief stopped as I started hearing footsteps right behind me. My heart stopped beating and I could barely breathe. Then someone shouted, "Boo!" behind me. As it turns out, it was one of the girls trying to scare me, and well, it definitely worked. Then we all met up behind the shop, said goodbye to each other and went home. Me and the other two girls, who were sisters, went home together since we lived very close to each other. I told my grandma and uncle, who lived there with grandma, about all that had happened, except the rotten corpse. I kept that a secret from my family, and I probably always will. I just asked my grandma, why was the school closed down? "Oh, because there weren't many students left in the town," she replied. "But there's also a legend that it closed down because one of the janitors was found dead on the second floor of the school," she added. That gave me chills. Yeah, thanks," I answered and went to sleep. This shouldn't come as a surprise, but I didn't sleep that night, and it was probably my imagination, but I heard noises from all around the house. When I was about 7 or 8, I was left home alone for the first time. I was so excited about this, because while I love my family, they can be very protective and overbearing at times. This was the first time that I was really given some personal freedom at home. It was also when strange things started to happen to me around my house, or at least the earliest memory I have of something happening. I was in my room just sketching and colouring while listening to the TV in the background when I realised that a show I don't like had come on. I also realised that I left the remote next to the TV. As I got up to get it, the second I was off the bed, a toy that was on the very top of my bookshelf on the other side of the room flew at the spot I was just sitting on my bed. I want it to be known that there was nothing that could have bumped the shelf, especially not to send it flying like that. There was no AC or windows open, and my door was shut, so none of my dogs could have snuck in and done something to move it. After that, I started to notice strange bruises and cuts on my body. I wasn't super active, but I was enough to just pass these off as nothing at first. But when I got foot surgery, I couldn't really do anything for a while. I noticed new and even worse injuries started to show up. Now I left my door open at night, and my dogs would sleep with me, so that's what I thought it was at first, like most people would. So I started to shut my door at night, at least until my injuries were gone, and told my family the reason and to leave it shut, to which they all agreed. However, I still kept getting more and more injuries, but when I asked my family, they all said they left my door shut and had no idea how I was still getting hurt, especially since I was known to be in an almost dead-like state, to put it in my friends' terms, when sleeping. This still went on, but they got less intense and soon just became normal to me. I went for a few years without a big incident again, but throughout the time I noticed that I would sometimes get an intense feeling of being watched, or see shadows moving out of the corner of my eye when no one else was around, or hear my name being called, but when asked my family they all said they didn't call or hear anything. My dogs would sometimes growl at a particular spot in my room, and their eyes would move as if they were watching someone walking around. They would sometimes even go as far as to stand over my body while looking at something I, nor anyone else, could see. I've also always had a hard time sleeping. My mum would often joke that I never slept for the first 5 years of my life, but on nights when it's especially hard, I can hear what is almost like someone breathing from the hallway. It's a different kind of breathing than the overly obnoxious snores my parents produce next door. This breathing is even, but heavy and still somehow loud enough to be heard over the snores. Over the years, however, it seems to be closer to the point where I will wake up hearing and feeling breath right in my ear, to which I just hold still and pretend to be asleep until I either fall back asleep or it goes away. And every so often I feel like something is holding me down. Now, I've never had sleep paralysis, at least as far as I know. I sleep on my stomach a lot of the time, but sometimes I'll wake up and feel pressure like hands on my shoulder blades or back. It's hard to describe, but it's a feeling in which I know it's not my family members or really anything human. And I don't think it's sleep paralysis because I know I can get out of it and move, but a gut feeling is telling me I'd really regret doing so. Now, to let it be known, yes, I do believe in the supernatural, But even so, I always try to think of a more logical explanation when things happen to me or others, and that's how I try to approach all of these situations. But the next time something happened, I couldn't reasonably think of one. My best friend had come to my house for a sleepover, and while I told her some of the weird things that have happened to me, I've never brought up the idea of the supernatural. But as we were watching a horror movie centered on ghosts, I asked her if she thought something like this could be my situation. And while she actually agreed, saying she always got a weird feeling at my house, we both just continued to watch the movie, trying to lighten the mood. However, my friend took it too far, I suppose, because she started to laugh and taunt my ghost, as she put it. As she did, the device we were watching the movie on switched off, and the movies and games on the shelves next to us all flew off and at us. My friend never said another bad word about ghosts after that, but even to this day electronics at my house still act up when that friend comes over. But are fine when she leaves or anyone else comes by. Now, as the years went on, I only had incidents that happened a couple of years after each other. I still got unexplainable cuts and bruises, but like I said, I was used to it by now, and the only things that I couldn't explain by any other logic was rather harmless stuff like mulch from a plant flying and almost hitting me, or a metal coffee can on the back of the table against the wall, almost falling right on my foot when I walked by. I recently got a ferret, and I would keep him in the room next door at night so my room wouldn't stink, and because he would often rattle and yank on the bars. However, not long after, I noticed he would be out of his cage when I walked in the room. I've seen him escape the cage right in front of my eyes, and for that I put a pillow under the table as he was on, so if he got out when he was there he wouldn't hurt himself. But what confused me was one day I heard him let out a distressed cry, and thinking he was hurt ran into the room, only to see him perfectly fine and on the bed in that room. Now that probably doesn't sound too bad, but he's only a baby and isn't long or strong enough to get up there on his own, and when I asked my family, all of them said they didn't put him there nor take him out of his cage. And I believed them, because 1, I immediately ran to that room, 2, I would have been able to hear the door open or close if they did, and 3, why would he cry out like he was scared or in pain if it was just one of my family members, all of which he is comfortable with, just picking him up and putting him on the bed. Another night we had family visiting, and I gave up my room and slept in the room with my ferret. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard the sound of footsteps pacing in the room, and then right after they stopped, I heard the noise of what sounded like my ferret hopping back in his cage. That may not sound weird, but just seconds prior to this, he was on the bed with me, and it was on the other side of the room, opposite of where his cage was, making it literally impossible for him to have made it there in that amount of time, especially for me not to hear him getting off the bed beforehand. I do believe there is a supernatural being in my house, and even though none of my other family is attacked by it, I decided to ask my skeptic of a mum one day what she thought about ghosts and demons. She immediately replied, "I don't really believe in any of that stuff." And so I left well alone for a while. But when I noticed more weird events happening around the house, I asked my mum again, and she replied in the exact same way, but this time I asked what she thought of our house. She then hesitated and said, "Yeah, there's something here." I was shocked, and when I asked her why, she said that for almost all my life she had seen weird stuff happen around the house. I'm 17 now, and nothing has happened or attacked me in years, other than the normal cuts and bruises that I've become accustomed to. I'm hopeful that it's over, or at least will be over when I go to college next year, but another part of me is waiting for something big to happen and actually try to majorly hurt me, or worse, that this thing is attached to me instead of the house, and that I'll never be rid of the burden that never seems to completely leave me. Brother Joachim lifted his eyes from the word of God and saw that the old man slept. The young monk gingerly placed the Bible down alongside his elder, snuffed out the candle, and proceeded back to the dormitories. Brother Gustavo slept alone in the northern section of the monastery due to the night terrors. It took many exhausted roommates and a natural talent for theatrics to convince the abbot of this. The former storage closet was just large enough to accommodate a twin bed, a side table wide enough to support his one possession, and a plain, uncomfortable chair in the corner from which to read it. Brother Gustavo opened his eyes as Joaquin's steps faded into the distance. The sweet sound of silence filled his ears, and for the first time since breakfast, he was alone. "Doesn't that boy know I've already read the damned thing thousands of times, as only a practiced curmudgeon could?" A stranger's voice spoke from the shadows. Some would be shocked to hear a holy man referring to the good book as a damned thing. Surprised by the unexpected response, Gustavo sat up too fast and fell out of bed, landing hard on his hip. A sharp crack echoed up from the floorboards and the old man howled. "Not I," the tall thin man spoke, now grinning down, amused at the injured monk. "Think you broke your hip there, Gus? Remember me, old fella?" Gus looked up, confused and terrified. Legs straight, the tall man bowed deeply, bringing the two eye to eye. The old man shook his head. "No." Seeing feigned disappointment on the tall man's face, Gustavo fought the ache back through fear and quickly placated. "But of course I am a very sick old man, and bound to die any day now. So you see my memory can hardly be relied upon for old friends such as yourself, let alone what I ate for supper." He laughed uncomfortably. "Yes, well, that's all quite understandable." The tall man spoke while effortlessly scooping the monk up into his arms and pulling him in close like an infant. "Allow me to tell you a story while we promenade. Many years ago I met a terrible man. He held a position of power that allowed him to take advantage of the needy and murder the innocent. The people eventually overthrew his rule, at which point he donned a disguise and disappeared into the masses, unwillingly forsaking his former status and wealth. Years later, the people had forgotten his crimes and moved on. He had gained anonymity working in the fields of a small village just outside this monastery. His boss commended him on work well done and was eventually promoted. One day, with the blessing of his employer, he opened a small shop. The shop did well, and slowly he began to gain the favour of his community. He even met a beautiful woman. The two fell madly in love and became engaged. Now I have to tell you, my dear monk, I've been around a very, very long time, and can say with all sincerity that as the highest authority on the subject, there are no blessings, there are no curses, there is no God, and I am the closest thing to a devil you will ever see." The tall man's toothy grin bore down as the old man shifted uncomfortably in his long, snake-like arms. As they began ascending a narrow stairwell, the tall man continued. "Things were going just a little too well for the merchant by my karmic standards. Please don't mistake me. While there is no omnipresent, intangible force bringing balance to the world, I personally have found purpose in said service over the millennia. I have partaken in the delights of both good and evil, for no greater reason than my own personal pleasure. And this merchant," he paused, "would be a pleasure." Gustavo watched in disbelief as the door blocking their path seemingly unlatched itself and swung open into the cold night air. Through what you might call magic, I intercepted his dreams and convinced the merchant to leave his fiancée, give away all his money, and become a monk. The tall man stepped through the doorway and into the rooftop garden, observing now the evening's moonlight made it look more like a graveyard. Now all I had to do was sit back and watch as the man cloistered himself away. He gave up the love of his life, relinquished his freedoms to the church, and when the monk arose from those baptismal waters, he left the merchant behind, along with all his ambitions, hopes and dreams. "You see what I did, Gus?" The tall man restrained laughter. "I took it all away, imprisoned the merchant and made him his own jailer." The tall man's laughter spiked on levels of insanity now. This monk spent over half his life worshipping a confabulation. For all he knew, his prayers called out to a flying purple monkey monster. The tall man's whole body shook, but Gustavo could only hear his voice as if from afar. Or a unicorn for that matter. The tall man's head flew back in a fit. "Tell me, Tavito, in all the years you've been monkeying about, all the years spent in prayer and devotion, have you heard the voice of the Almighty?" Can you say today that if there is no heaven and no hell, that this was a life well lived?" Gus's reply was as empty as the feeling settled into the pit of his stomach. Yes, that's what I live for. That beautiful, uniquely whoopsie-doodle expression written all over your dumb face right now." The tall man's eyes watered. "You've just made me a very happy being tonight, Gus. I mean it. This really couldn't have happened to a better me." The tall man kissed Gustavo's forehead tenderly. The two cried for very different reasons as they took in breathtaking moonlit valley from the rooftop's edge. "You've made me a very happy being," he repeated, then tossed the old monk to his death.